A narcissistic husband often treats his wife in ways that leave deep emotional scars, even though he may appear charming and confident to the outside world. Behind closed doors, the reality can be very different. He tends to see the relationship as a place where his needs, his desires, and his image come first, while his wife's feelings, sacrifices, and individuality are dismissed or minimized. At first, he might appear attentive and loving, showering his wife with compliments and affection, but over time that shifts into a pattern of control, criticism, and manipulation. A narcissistic husband's need for control is one of the most defining characteristics of his behavior within a marriage. Unlike a healthy relationship, which is built on mutual respect, love, and understanding, a relationship with a narcissistic man often feels like a battlefield where power is the ultimate prize. His focus is not on creating balance or partnership, but on ensuring that he always holds the upper hand. This control can manifest in countless ways, ranging from subtle manipulation to overt dominance, and it often grows stronger as the marriage progresses. In the early stages, the control may not be obvious. He might seem protective, attentive, or even overly caring. For example, he may say things like, "I just want to take care of you," or "You don't need to worry about this, I'll handle it." While these statements may sound thoughtful, they often serve as the foundation for establishing dominance. Gradually, what begins as protective behavior can turn to control over decisions: what she wears, where she goes, how she spends money, or who she talks to. His need to dominate becomes clearer when she tries to assert her independence, as that threatens his sense of superiority. One of the ways a narcissistic husband maintains this dominance is by undermining his wife's confidence in her own judgment. If she expresses a desire to make choices independently, he may respond with criticism, sarcasm, or dismissive remarks. He might call her naïve, irrational, or too emotional to make good decisions. By belittling her capabilities, he keeps her second-guessing herself, which makes it easier for him to take charge. Over time, she may find herself relying on him for decisions she once handled comfortably on her own, not because she cannot make them, but because he has conditioned her to believe she shouldn't. Another aspect of his control lies in his need to dominate conversations and narratives within the relationship. When disagreements arise, the narcissistic husband often refuses to acknowledge his wife's perspective. Instead, he twists the situation until she feels guilty or wrong, even if she had a valid concern. For instance, if she points out his hurtful behavior, he may quickly shift the focus to something she supposedly did wrong, making her feel responsible for his actions. This constant manipulation ensures that his viewpoint always takes precedence and that her independence of thought is minimized. Financial control is also a common tool of dominance. Many narcissistic husbands restrict access to money or closely monitor how it is spent. This gives them a sense of power, as financial dependence often limits a wife's ability to leave or even challenge his authority. By controlling resources, he reinforces her reliance on him, further stripping away her sense of independence. On a deeper level, his need for control stems from insecurity, even though he projects an image of superiority. A narcissistic man fears losing power, attention, or admiration. His wife's independence threatens this because it implies that she can survive without him, or worse, thrive without him. To prevent this, he creates an environment where she feels that her choices, identity, and freedom must be filtered through him. The impact of this constant control is profound. Over time, the wife may feel as though she has lost her autonomy. Simple acts like pursuing a hobby, making a purchase, or visiting friends can become sources of conflict. She may begin to shrink herself, avoiding anything that might trigger his disapproval. In essence, her independence erodes bit by bit, leaving her trapped in a cycle where his dominance defines the boundaries of her life. A relationship where one partner must always dominate and control the other is not love, it is imprisonment. While the narcissistic husband may convince himself that he is being protective or that he knows what's best, the reality is that he is suffocating his wife's freedom and individuality. Recognizing this behavior for what it is, control masked as care, is the first step for a wife to reclaim her independence and realize that she deserves a relationship where respect and equality, not dominance, form the foundation. One of the most painful aspects of being married to a narcissistic husband is the way he consistently dismisses and invalidates his wife's emotions. In a healthy marriage, emotions are respected, and both partners strive to understand and support one another. But with a narcissist, emotional connection becomes one-sided. The husband expects his wife to validate and support his feelings while offering little to no empathy in return. Instead of nurturing her emotional well-being, he often trivializes her concerns, mocks her sensitivity, or outright ignores her when she is vulnerable. This dismissal usually starts subtly. In the beginning, he may interrupt her when she tries to express herself, brushing off her thoughts with phrases like, "You're overreacting," or "That's not a big deal." While these may seem like small remarks, over time they accumulate, creating an environment where she feels her inner world has no place in the marriage. Every time he invalidates her feelings, he sends the message that her emotions are unworthy of attention, pushing her into silence. When she shares her pain or struggles, instead of offering comfort, he might turn the conversation back to himself. For instance, if she says she feels stressed from managing the home, the children, or her career, he may respond by highlighting how hard he works, making her feel guilty for even bringing up her needs. Her emotions become overshadowed by his, leaving her to carry the burden alone. This lack of acknowledgement not only isolates her emotionally, but also erodes her trust in the relationship. Mockery is another tactic he uses to dismiss her. If she cries, he might label her as too dramatic or too sensitive. If she expresses frustration, he may laugh at her anger instead of taking it seriously. This ridicule is deeply damaging because it doesn't just dismiss her emotions, it ridicules her for having them in the first place. Over time, she begins to believe that expressing her feelings is useless or even dangerous, since it only leads to more humiliation. Perhaps one of the most destructive forms of emotional invalidation is when he flips the situation to make her question her right to feel upset. For example, if she tells him that something he said hurt her, he may accuse her of being selfish, needy, or too sensitive. He turns her natural emotional response into a flaw, leaving her confused and ashamed for simply having feelings. This is a form of emotional gaslighting, twisting reality to make her doubt her own experiences. The consequences of this invalidation are severe. A wife who is consistently dismissed begins to internalize the belief that her emotions don't matter. She may stop sharing her thoughts altogether, bottling up her pain in silence. This emotional suppression can lead to feelings of loneliness, depression, and even physical stress-related illnesses. She may start to feel invisible in her own marriage, as though her role is to serve his needs while her inner world remains unseen and unsupported. What makes this dynamic even harder is that many wives try harder to be understood. They may rephrase their feelings, soften their tone, or go out of their way to avoid sounding emotional. Yet, no matter how carefully they express themselves, their husband still invalidates them. This cycle leaves them feeling like the problem lies within themselves, when in truth, the issue lies in his lack of empathy and respect. A marriage where one partner invalidates the other's emotions is not a partnership, it is emotional neglect. The wife deserves to be heard, valued, and cared for just as much as her husband. But with a narcissistic man, emotional needs are seen as inconveniences unless they revolve around him. Recognizing this pattern is critical because it allows the wife to understand that her feelings are real, they do matter, and she is not wrong for wanting acknowledgement and empathy. At its core, emotional dismissal is a way for the narcissistic husband to maintain power. By invalidating his wife's emotions, he ensures that her voice is muted, that her needs are minimized, and that the relationship revolves around him. But once she realizes this, she can begin to reclaim her voice, knowing that her emotions are valid and that she deserves a love that honors her inner world instead of erasing it. Gaslighting is one of the most destructive tools a narcissistic husband uses in his marriage. It is a form of psychological manipulation designed to make his wife question her memory, perception, and even her sanity. Over time, gaslighting creates a distorted reality where she no longer trusts her own instincts and instead relies on his version of the truth. This makes it easier for him to maintain power and control while keeping her emotionally trapped. The term gaslighting comes from a classic film in which a husband manipulates his wife into believing she is losing her mind. In real life, the narcissistic husband employs similar tactics. For example, if he says something cruel and she calls him out on it, he may insist he never said it at all. If she reminds him of a promise he made, he might laugh and accuse her of imagining things. By repeatedly denying or twisting the truth, he plants seeds of doubt in her mind, until she begins questioning her own memory and judgment. One common gaslighting tactic is denial of reality. When she confronts him about hurtful actions, he flatly denies they happened, even if she clearly remembers them. He may say, "You're making things up," or "That never happened," leaving her confused and frustrated. Another tactic is minimization, where he admits something occurred but downplays its significance, saying things like, "I wasn't that bad," or "You're exaggerating." These responses not only invalidate her feelings, but also shift the blame onto her, making her feel unreasonable for even bringing it up. Gaslighting also appears in the form of deflection. Instead of addressing her concerns, he turns the tables, accusing her of being the problem. If she points out that he ignored her needs, he may accuse her of being needy or selfish. If she says he was unkind, he may say she is too sensitive or always looking for drama. In doing this, he avoids accountability and makes her feel guilty for expressing herself. Over time, she may begin to suppress her feelings altogether, fearing that they will always be twisted against her. The psychological toll of gaslighting is immense. A wife who is repeatedly told that her memories are false or her feelings are exaggerated begins to lose trust in herself. She may start asking questions like, "Did that really happen?" Or "Maybe I am overreacting." This self-doubt erodes her confidence and sense of reality, leaving her dependent on her husband's version of events. For him, this is the ultimate victory. He becomes the gatekeeper of truth, while she becomes the confused follower. Gaslighting is not always loud or obvious. Sometimes it is delivered in quiet, manipulative ways like a sarcastic laugh and eye roll, or a dismissive tone that makes her feel foolish for even speaking up. Other times, it may be masked as concern, such as when he says, "You must be tired. That's why you're remembering it wrong," or "You're too emotional right now to think clearly." These subtle techniques can be even more damaging because they appear caring on the surface, while in reality, they undermine her grip on reality. What makes gaslighting so dangerous is that it isolates the wife not just from her support system, but from herself. When she cannot rely on her own perception, she loses her inner compass. This makes it harder for her to reach out for help because she fears others may also see her as irrational or unstable. It's a slow, invisible erosion of self-trust, which leaves her more vulnerable to further manipulation and control. At its core, gaslighting is about power. The narcissistic husband cannot tolerate being wrong, accountable, or seen in a negative light. Instead of owning his mistakes, he rewrites reality to suit himself. By making his wife doubt her truth, he shields his ego and ensures that he remains dominant in the relationship. For the wife, the first step toward breaking free from gaslighting is to recognize it for what it is: manipulation, not truth. Keeping records, confiding in trusted friends, or seeking professional guidance can help her rebuild trust in her own experiences. Most importantly, she must understand that her perceptions, feelings, and memories are valid, even if he insists otherwise. Gaslighting is not love. It is abuse dressed in denial and distortion. A marriage built on lies and manipulation can never provide the safety and intimacy that true love requires. By shining light on this behavior, the wife can begin to reclaim her reality and realize that her sanity is not the problem. The problem is his relentless need to twist the truth to keep control. One of the most manipulative behaviors of a narcissistic husband is the way he uses love and affection, not as genuine expressions of care, but as tools of control. In a healthy marriage, love is unconditional, partners support each other through good and bad, and affection flows naturally. But with a narcissistic husband, affection becomes transactional. He gives it when it benefits him and withholds it when he wants to punish, control, or manipulate. This creates a confusing cycle for his wife, one where she is constantly left wondering what she did wrong and what she must do to earn his love again. At the beginning of the relationship, the narcissistic husband often showers his wife with affection. He may be overly attentive, giving compliments, gifts, and grand gestures of love. This is often referred to as the honeymoon phase or love bombing. In this stage, his wife feels cherished and secure, believing she has found someone who deeply values her. However, as the relationship progresses, the warmth fades and his affection becomes inconsistent. This change is deliberate. It keeps her hooked on the memory of the man who once made her feel so loved, while forcing her to chase after glimpses of that affection again. Affection becomes conditional, tied to how well she meets his expectations. If she does something he approves of, such as agreeing with him, prioritizing his needs, or staying silent when he's dismissive. He rewards her with kindness, attention, or intimacy. But if she challenges him, asserts herself, or fails to live up to his unrealistic demands, he withholds affection. He may become cold, distant, or even cruel, leaving her desperate to fix the situation and regain his approval. This push and pull dynamic keeps her trapped in a cycle of dependency, where her emotional state rises and falls according to his moods. The inconsistency of his affection is what makes this cycle so powerful. If he were always cruel, she might eventually detach and walk away. But because he occasionally shows love, even if briefly, she clings to the hope that the man she first knew still exists. These moments of warmth act like emotional breadcrumbs, keeping her invested in the relationship despite the pain. Psychologists compare this to a variable reward system, the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. The uncertainty of when the next reward will come keeps a person hooked, unable to walk away. This conditional love deeply damages a wife's self-worth. Over time, she begins to believe that she must earn love by behaving in certain ways. She might think, if I just try harder, he will love me again, or maybe if I don't upset him, things will go back to how they used to be. She may compromise her values, silence her voice, and sacrifice her needs in the desperate pursuit of his approval. In doing so, she loses touch with her authentic self, living in a constant state of anxiety about whether she is enough. Sexual intimacy can also become part of this manipulation. A narcissistic husband may use physical affection as a reward when his wife is compliant, but withhold it when she displeases him. This not only impacts her self-esteem, but also creates confusion between love, control, and desire. Instead of intimacy being an expression of mutual closeness, it becomes another tool to reinforce his dominance. The long-term effect of conditional love is emotional exhaustion. His wife may feel like she is constantly walking on eggshells, never sure when affection will be given or withdrawn. This emotional roller coaster drains her energy, leaving her too tired to fight back or demand better treatment. Worse, she may start to believe that this cycle is normal, forgetting what real love, consistent, supportive, and unconditional, feels like. At its core, conditional affection is not love at all. It is manipulation disguised as intimacy. By controlling when and how affection is given, the narcissistic husband keeps his wife dependent on him, always striving for approval that he dangles like a prize. Recognizing this cycle is essential for her healing. She must understand that genuine love does not need to be earned through obedience or perfection. Real love is steady, patient, and unconditional. It builds, rather than destroys, self-worth. Breaking free from the cycle of conditional affection requires courage and awareness. Once she sees that his love is not truly love but a tool of control, she can begin to detach emotionally and rebuild her sense of self. She deserves affection that flows freely, not affection that is handed out like a reward for compliance. True love empowers, it does not confuse, weaken, or enslave. A narcissistic husband knows that his control over his wife is strongest when she has no one else to rely on. For this reason, isolation becomes one of his most powerful tactics. By cutting her off from family, friends, and personal interests, he ensures that her world revolves entirely around him. This isolation does not always happen suddenly. It is usually a slow, subtle process that leaves her dependent, vulnerable, and unable to seek the support she desperately needs. In the beginning, the isolation may appear disguised as love or concern. He might say things like, "I just want more time with you," or "Your friends don't really understand us." At first, his wife may feel flattered, believing he simply wants closeness. But gradually, his suggestions become restrictions. He may criticize her family members, pointing out their flaws and making her question their loyalty. He might complain that her friends are a bad influence or that they take up too much of her time. Eventually, she finds herself distancing from the people who once grounded her, often to avoid conflict with him. Once her connections begin to weaken, he tightens the isolation further. He may discourage her from visiting her family, make her feel guilty for spending time with friends, or create arguments whenever she tries to maintain relationships outside the marriage. Over time, she may feel it is easier to stop reaching out altogether than to endure his anger or cold treatment afterward. By doing this, he ensures that she becomes increasingly dependent on him for social interaction, validation, and even identity. Isolation also extends to her personal interests and passions. A narcissistic husband often views her hobbies, career ambitions, or self-care activities as threats because they represent independence. If she invests time in activities that make her happy, he feels as though he is losing control. To prevent this, he may belittle her hobbies, saying they are a waste of time, or create obstacles that make it difficult for her to pursue them. If she excels in her career, he might accuse her of neglecting him or their family. Little by little, she sacrifices her interests in an attempt to keep peace in the marriage, not realizing that with every sacrifice she loses a piece of herself. Financial isolation is another common strategy. By controlling money, he limits her ability to connect with the outside world. Without financial independence, she may struggle to visit family, maintain friendships, or even leave the relationship if she wants to. He may justify this control by saying he is better at managing money, or that she should not worry about financial matters. In reality, it is another way of keeping her trapped and powerless. The psychological effects of isolation are profound. A wife who is cut off from her support system begins to feel lonely, anxious, and misunderstood. Without friends or family to validate her experiences, she may start believing her husband's narrative, that she is the problem, that she is overreacting, or that no one else would understand her. This deepens her dependence on him, even when his treatment is hurtful. In many cases, the isolation becomes so strong that she forgets what it feels like to be supported or valued by others. What makes this tactic especially harmful is that it not only removes her external support, but also diminishes her internal strength. When she loses touch with the people and passions that make her feel alive, she loses a sense of who she is. Her identity becomes tied entirely to her husband and her role in the relationship. This makes it even harder for her to imagine a life outside of him, which is exactly what he wants. Isolation is not love. A loving husband encourages his wife to nurture relationships, chase her passions, and grow as an individual. A narcissistic husband, however, fears her independence and therefore cages her in emotional, social, and sometimes physical ways. The path out of isolation begins with recognizing it for what it is, a deliberate strategy to control. Reconnecting with trusted family members, friends, or support groups can help rebuild her sense of self and remind her that she is not alone. Pursuing even small personal interests can reignite her independence and strengthen her identity. Most importantly, she must realize that isolation is not a reflection of her worth, but a reflection of his fear of losing control. When a woman reclaims her connections and passions, she begins to break free from the invisible chains of isolation, and with that freedom, she can start to see that her life does not have to revolve around his control. Her life can be her own again. The impact of being married to a narcissistic husband does not stop at day-to-day conflicts. Over time, his behavior leaves long-lasting scars that reach deep into his wife's emotional, psychological, and even physical well-being. While the world outside may see her as composed, inside she often carries a heavy burden, one of exhaustion, insecurity, and a fractured sense of self. These long-term effects are not simply temporary struggles. They can alter the way she views herself, others, and relationships altogether. One of the most noticeable effects is emotional exhaustion. Living with a narcissistic husband feels like walking on eggshells. His moods are unpredictable, his approval inconsistent, and his affection conditional. Each day, she must navigate this emotional minefield, trying to anticipate what might trigger him. This constant vigilance drains her of energy. Instead of living freely, she lives in survival mode, always cautious, always careful, always bracing for the next storm. Over time, this exhaustion becomes overwhelming, leaving her with little strength to invest in herself, her dreams, or even her happiness. Another long-term consequence is the erosion of self-confidence. A narcissistic husband thrives on criticism, mockery, and comparison. By belittling his wife's abilities, dismissing her feelings, and making her doubt her memory through gaslighting, he gradually breaks down her sense of worth. She begins to question her abilities as a partner, a mother, a professional, or simply as an individual. This insecurity does not vanish easily. It embeds itself into her self-image. Even when she succeeds in something, she may feel undeserving or fear it will not be enough to win his approval. As her confidence diminishes, she often begins to struggle with her identity. A narcissistic husband's control and manipulation strip away her independence and individuality. She sacrifices her interests, silences her opinions, and suppresses her emotions to avoid conflict. Over time, she forgets who she truly is outside of the relationship. The woman who once had passions, hobbies, and dreams now sees herself only in relation to him. She may feel like a shadow of her former self, unsure of what she likes, believes, or wants anymore. This loss of identity is one of the deepest wounds inflicted by narcissistic abuse. The long-term effects are not limited to emotions. They can also manifest in mental and physical health. Many women in such marriages experience anxiety, depression, or chronic stress. The constant invalidation and isolation can make them feel hopeless, while the stress of trying to maintain peace can lead to physical issues such as fatigue, headaches, or digestive problems. Some may even experience symptoms of post-traumatic stress, such as hypervigilance, flashbacks, or difficulty trusting others. Relationships with others are also deeply affected. Because she has been conditioned to doubt herself and fear judgment, she may withdraw socially, even if her husband is not directly preventing her. She might feel embarrassed to share her struggles or believe no one will understand. This isolation only deepens the damage, as it denies her the external validation that could remind her of her worth. Even after leaving the relationship, she may carry this mistrust into new friendships or romantic partnerships, fearing that others will treat her the same way. Perhaps the most painful effect is the internalization of blame. A narcissistic husband is skilled at making his wife believe that everything is her fault. His anger, his coldness, even the decline of the marriage itself. Over years of hearing these accusations, she may start to believe them. She convinces herself that she is not good enough, that she is too emotional, too demanding, or too difficult to love. This self-blame lingers long after the relationship, becoming a silent enemy she battles daily. Despite these heavy consequences, healing is possible. The first step is awareness, recognizing that the emotional exhaustion, insecurity, and identity struggles are not signs of weakness, but natural responses to prolonged emotional abuse. Rebuilding begins with small steps, reconnecting with passions, seeking support from trusted friends or professionals, and affirming her worth independent of anyone else's approval. Over time, she can learn to trust her instincts again, regain her confidence, and rediscover the identity that was buried under years of control. The long-term effects of a narcissistic husband's treatment are undeniably painful, but they do not define her future. With courage and support, she can transform the pain into strength, using her experiences to build resilience and wisdom. While he may have sought to erase her identity, she has the power to reclaim it and to create a life where her voice, her worth, and her happiness are no longer dependent on someone else's control, but on her own self, love, and freedom.